Prime Minister Justin Trudeau today attaching a timeline to the appointment of a special rapporteur to look into foreign election meddling. He says he'll name someone in the coming days or week. That didn't, as you heard there, blunt criticism, though, from Tory leader PM Trudeau, who suggests Canadians are questioning election results without a public inquiry. Let's bring in the front bench to weigh in on all of that. Joining me this evening, former New Brunswick Liberal Premier Brian Gallant. He's the CEO of Space Canada now. Conservative strategist Kate Harrison is vice chair at Summa Strategies. CTV News political analyst and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair is with us, as well as the Toronto Star's Queen's Park bureau chief Rob Benzie. Hi, everyone. Good to see you. Rob, I'll start with you. We're many weeks into this. Last week, I think we were on just following the announcement of a special rapporteur. We've got a timeline now, which is, very exciting, and the announcement that there will be consultations on a foreign agents registry. Do you feel like the Liberals have turned a bit of a page here, or do you expect to keep hearing the criticism from Mr. Poilievre we heard tonight?
They're trying to turn a page, Vassy, but the pages are stuck together. I mean, it was 8 days ago that we first heard this great term, special rapporteur, which has now become part of our political lexicon in Canada. And we now know that special rapporteur will be appointed within days or weeks, the PM said today. So that's not exactly inspiring anyone feeling that there was a sense of urgency around this. Yes, the foreign agency registry, that's something that a lot of people have been calling about for many, many months, not just the past 2 weeks of this latest controversy. And then, of course, on Friday, we had a Conservative MPP leave Premier Doug Ford's caucus after he was named as being connected to this alleged Chinese meddling. Vincent Ke, who's Don Valley North MPP. So, I mean, sometimes at some point you have to pull the Band-Aid off, and I'm not sure that the Prime Minister has done that just yet.
It certainly, Tom, doesn't seem like that is going to happen. I mean, they've now set out a process. I think it would be odd if they decided to say, you know what, that process we just went to great pains to lay out for Canadians, we're going to skip it and go right to a public inquiry, even if the political imperative is there.
I agree completely. But at the same time, the average Canadian, look at the numbers in the polling. It's consistent. Well over 70% of Canadians saying, we've got to find out what went wrong. And that's all Canadians care about. This is the backbone of our democracy. How we hold free general elections in this country is essential to whether or not we maintain our democratic institutions. So Canadians are already there. Mr. Trudeau has chosen, as one wag put it, to have an inquiry as to whether or not he should have an inquiry. So I guess that we're going to have to be patient and go through that process. I have no doubt that Mr. Trudeau will find somebody with absolutely sterling credentials to look at this. But Canadians will accept nothing less than a full airing of this. It's not enough. I mean, there were people in the government trying to suggest earlier in the week, well, the Chinese, they've been doing this in other countries as well, so let's just move along. No, that's not an answer to why Canada had this information and apparently didn't do anything about it. And I think that that's where it becomes very tricky for Mr. Trudeau. He knows exactly what the timeline is. He knows exactly what information he was given, and he's going to do the best he can to try to shepherd this through without any of that coming back to him. I think the average Canadian deserves more than that and expects more than that. We'll see whether Trudeau can hold the line. He's quite good at that, but on this one, I think it's the first time I've seen him be under so much pressure and have trouble holding that line.
Is it also tricky, Tom lays out how it's tricky for Trudeau, Kate, is it also tricky for Mr. Poilievre in, today sort of surmising that Canadians are questioning the results of the election because there hasn't been a full airing of whatever happened through an inquiry? I understand the latter point of that argument, but the polls that Tom points to actually show the opposite, that Canadians aren't questioning the overall outcome, but they do genuinely want a public airing of what went down.
Yeah, and that's been a really sticky issue for the Tories, of course. When this first came up at a House committee, there was a lot of concern about the Conservative argument being equated to Trump-style politics and calling into question the result. And I think Conservatives have been so far very careful around that. And I think the wise and prudent thing for them to do is to continue to exercise that caution. But where Mr. Poilievre is right is in talking about the thou doth protest too much sort of approach of the PM on this. Like, why on earth are members of Parliament at the Procedure and House Affairs Committee so intent on filibustering to avoid the Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister appearing? It seems like a very strange thing to do if there is, in fact, nothing to hide. And if the government does want to shift the page, Vassy, back to message control, they really do need to start being more proactive on these things. Right now, they seem to be just, bearing down and hoping that it passes them by. Maybe they're hoping the Biden visit will provide an opportunity to change the channel. But I think if that special rapporteur is not named before then, we are going to have a ton of questions as a part of that visit on what the government is actually doing about foreign interference, because the U.S. is doing quite a bit.
It is interesting, just jumping off what Kate said, Brian, the reference to the committee today. That's one of the committees that's looking into, and it's highly political for sure, looking into what happened. But there was all this filibustering that occurred. It occurred this week. It occurred last week in order to avoid basically what the opposition wants to do, which is call the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Katie Telford. It's like inside baseball stuff, but it does create an appearance again, I think, for some Canadians of like, why stop anything from happening if you truly think there's nothing to conceal?
Yeah, it does for sure, and I think that the clear message that the Trudeau government should get is that they probably didn't handle this as proactively and arguably as well as they should have. And look, they could have the impression that they looked at the confidential information that they are privy to and said, look, an inquiry is not necessary. We are taking this matter seriously. We're getting committees to look at this, and I think the argument that they would probably make is to get the right committees to look at it, committees that can have the sort of the confidential documents come in front of them, and then that way they can talk to some of the staffers, I'm sure, in a sort of different type of setting instead of it being sort of political and not really necessarily being the right venue with regards to the confidential information. But that said, I'm sure Trudeau and company and everybody that's been talking about this in the center, as they're often called, are probably saying to themselves, well, it feels like we've underestimated the interest in this. So look, the rapporteur, I think, is a bit of a way, last week, a compromise, but in this case, it might also be sort of a way to get out of this. The rapporteur is going to have the ability to call an inquiry if they see fit. So I think, in a way, which is probably not very often, the government may be saying, I hope they say the rapporteur calls for an inquiry so we can sort of move on and get this done, which is obviously not necessarily the norm. Or maybe they are saying to themselves, look, it's so clear to us that an inquiry is not necessary, and if the rapporteur is somebody that is credible enough that can maybe get other parties to accept the fact that it's not necessary and instead other actions will suffice. I'm not sure that'll happen, but you never know. And the last point I'd make, though, is I do think we have to give a little bit of time. Anybody that's sort of an eminent Canadian, as the term is being sort of thrown around, I don't know how you get that on your LinkedIn page to be called an eminent Canadian, but anybody that's going to put their sort of credibility on the line for this exercise really has to think it through. So I think that whoever ends up accepting does deserve a bit of time to think it over.